A father marries his own daughter, but you won't believe what happened on their wedding day. The large chandelier sparkled above the charity ball as Thomas Lee fixed his tie one last time. At 58, his silver hair and kind eyes showed the journey of a man who had seen both joy and pain. 30 years had passed since that terrible day when he lost his wife and baby girl in what everyone called the Great Flood. The waters had swept through the hospital where his wife had just given birth. For years, Thomas couldn't even talk about it without his voice breaking. "Mr. Lee, so glad you could make it," said the host, a round man with a friendly smile. "Your company's donation will help build 3 new schools." Thomas smiled and nodded. He had built his construction business from nothing after the tragedy. Work became his way to heal, to feel like he was still building something in a world that had taken so much from him. "There's someone you should meet," the host continued, guiding Thomas through the crowd. "She runs the biggest adoption agency in the state. Started it all by herself." They stopped in front of a woman in a simple blue dress. She turned around, and Thomas felt something strange, like the floor had shifted under his feet. "This is Lisa Chen," the host said proudly. "Lisa, meet Thomas Lee, our biggest donor this year." Lisa was about 35, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her smile seemed familiar somehow, though Thomas was sure they'd never met. When they shook hands, an odd feeling washed over him. "Have we met before?" he asked before he could stop himself. Lisa laughed, a warm sound that echoed in some distant corner of his memory. "I don't think so, but people often say I remind them of someone." Lisa grew up in foster care, the host explained. That's why she's so passionate about helping children find homes. Thomas couldn't explain why, but he wanted to know more about this woman. "Would you like a drink?" he offered, pointing toward the bar. As they sipped their drinks, Thomas found himself talking more than he had in years. Lisa was easy to talk to. She told him how she'd been adopted after a big flood hit the city. "My birth certificate was damaged," she explained. "All they know is that I was born during the storm. My adoptive parents were wonderful, but they passed away 5 years ago." Her eyes showed a flash of the same loneliness Thomas knew too well. "I lost my family in that same flood," Thomas said quietly. "My wife had just had our baby girl at Memorial Hospital when the waters came." Lisa's eyes widened slightly. "That's where I was found. Memorial Hospital. The nurses carried babies to the roof, but records got mixed up in the chaos." Thomas felt his heart beating faster but tried to dismiss the thought forming in his mind. Many babies were born that day. It was just a coincidence. They spent the rest of the evening talking. Lisa told him about her work finding homes for orphaned children around the world. Thomas shared stories about his construction projects, building schools and hospitals. "We're actually rebuilding Memorial Hospital next year," he said. "Making it stronger with better safety systems." "Full circle," Lisa smiled. "Maybe I'll come see it when it's done." When the evening ended, Thomas surprised himself by asking for her number. "Maybe we could have dinner sometime?" The words felt strange coming from his mouth. He hadn't asked anyone to dinner in years. Lisa's smile lit up her face. "I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, they met often. Thomas found himself drawn to Lisa in a way he couldn't explain. She was smart and kind, with a quiet strength that reminded him of his late wife. Sometimes she'd make a gesture or say something that gave him an odd sense of déjà vu. "You scrunch your nose exactly like my wife used to when you're thinking," he told her one evening as they walked through the park. "And you tap your fingers when you're nervous, just like my dad did," she replied with a laugh. They joked about these similarities, never once considering the truth hiding behind them. 3 months after they met, Thomas invited Lisa to his home for dinner. As she looked at the photos on his wall, she stopped at one picture. "Is this your wife?" she asked, looking at the smiling woman holding a newborn. "Yes," Thomas said softly. "That's Anna. It was taken the day before the flood, at the hospital. That tiny bundle is my daughter, Grace." Lisa stared at the photo, her hand touching a small birthmark below her ear, a mark shaped like a tiny crescent moon. "She's beautiful," Lisa whispered, not noticing how Thomas had frozen, his eyes fixed on her hand touching that birthmark. A cold wave washed over Thomas. His daughter had been born with that exact same mark. The doctors had said it was unusual, crescent-shaped and in that exact spot. "Lisa," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "were you born with that birthmark?" She looked surprised. "Yes, I've had it since birth." "Why?" Thomas took the photo from the wall and looked closely at the tiny baby. There, just visible on the newborn's neck, was a small crescent mark. "It's probably nothing," he said, putting the photo back. But his mind was racing. Could it be possible, after all these years? The hospital records had been destroyed in the flood. Babies had been evacuated to different shelters. He pushed the thought away. It was crazy to think this woman could be his long-lost daughter. Besides, in the months they'd known each other, his feelings had grown beyond friendship. There was a connection between them he couldn't explain. As they ate dinner, Thomas tried to focus on the present, on the warm feeling of having Lisa across from him at his table. Yet the question lingered in the back of his mind, a whisper he couldn't quite silence. When Lisa left that night, Thomas sat alone in his living room, looking at old photos and wondering about the strange path life sometimes takes. How people can be separated and then brought back together in the most unexpected ways. He didn't know then that this was just the beginning of a story more surprising than anything he could imagine. The birthmark was just the first clue in a mystery 30 years in the making. A mystery that would soon change everything. Part T. The deepening bond over. The following months, Robert and Elena developed a close friendship that gradually blossomed into romance. Neither was aware of their true connection as father and daughter, with Elena having been raised by her adoptive parents who had since passed away. They found they shared similar mannerisms, interests, and even the same rare medical condition, clues, they attributed to being kindred spirits rather than genetics. As their relationship progressed, Robert proposed marriage, and Elena accepted, both believing they had found their soulmate after years of loneliness. Part 3. The wedding preparations. As wedding preparations began, strange coincidences multiplied. Family friends who had known Robert years ago commented on Elena's striking resemblance to Robert's late wife. An elderly nurse who had worked at the hospital during the disaster recognized Elena's distinctive birthmark. Meanwhile, Robert discovered an old locket containing a baby photo that looked remarkably like Elena's childhood pictures. Still, with the wedding day approaching, these pieces remained disconnected in their minds as they focused on their future together. Part 4. The discovery. 3 days before the wedding, Elena received the results of a genetic ancestry test she had taken months earlier out of curiosity about her biological parents. The results indicated a parent-child match with Robert, sending her world crashing down. Confronting Robert with the evidence, they were both horrified by the truth. Investigators confirmed that during the chaos of the hospital disaster, 30 years ago, baby Elena had been mistakenly declared deceased and subsequently adopted. The wedding was immediately called off as both struggled to process this life-altering revelation. Part 5. The wedding day transformation. On what would have been their wedding day, Robert and Elena decided to repurpose the ceremony. Standing before their assembled guests, they revealed the extraordinary truth of their relationship. Instead of exchanging marriage vows, they performed a deeply moving father-daughter reunion ceremony, celebrating the miracle that had brought them back together. The wedding venue was transformed into a family reunion celebration, with the planned reception becoming a party to honor their incredible story of loss and rediscovery. Robert legally recognized Elena as his daughter, and together they established a foundation to help reunite other families separated by disasters or circumstances beyond their control. Their story made headlines worldwide, reminding people that sometimes what appears controversial on the surface can hide a beautiful truth underneath. The weeks turned into months as Thomas and Lisa grew closer. The strange feeling Thomas had about the birthmark faded to the back of his mind, replaced by the simple joy of having someone to share his life with again. They fell into easy routines. Sunday mornings meant coffee at the little cafe near the park. Lisa always ordered the same thing: black coffee with a splash of cream and a blueberry muffin. It was exactly how Thomas's wife Anna used to take her coffee down to the way. Lisa would sip it slowly, savoring each taste. "You're staring again," Lisa said one Sunday, looking up from her newspaper. Thomas smiled. "Sorry, sometimes you remind me of someone." "Your wife?" Lisa asked gently. He nodded. "Little things. The way you hold your cup. How you always check the weather section first." Lisa laughed. "My adoptive mom used to say I got my habits from someone else. She'd joke that I must have inherited my love for rainy days and classical music from my birth parents." Thomas felt that strange tug again. "I love rainy days too. Anna and I used to sit on the porch during storms. Our daughter was born during the biggest storm this city ever saw." These coincidences piled up, but neither connected the dots. Instead, their friendship deepened, and with time, it changed into something more. Their first kiss happened on a rainy evening 6 months after they met. Thomas had invited Lisa over for dinner to celebrate her agency placing its 100th child that year. "To finding homes," Thomas had said, raising his glass. "To making families whole," Lisa added. Later, as thunder rumbled outside, they stood near the window watching lightning flash across the sky. Thomas turned to see Lisa's face lit by a brief flash, and without thinking, he leaned down and kissed her. To his surprise and joy, she kissed him back. "I wasn't planning that," he admitted afterward, slightly embarrassed. Lisa's eyes were bright. "I'm glad you did. I've been wondering what it would be like." Their relationship bloomed like a flower turning toward the sun. Thomas, who had lived in the shadows of grief for so long, found himself smiling more, laughing easily. His assistant at work noticed the change. "You're humming," she pointed out one morning. "You never hum." Thomas hadn't even realized he was doing it. The song had been one that Lisa had played in her car the day before. For Lisa, who had grown up feeling slightly out of place even in her loving adoptive family, Thomas felt like coming home. Something about him made her feel safe, understood, in a way she'd never experienced before. "It's like I've known you my whole life," she told him one evening as they cooked dinner together in his kitchen. She chopped vegetables while he stirred the sauce, moving around each other with comfortable familiarity. "Maybe we knew each other in another life," Thomas joked, but the words felt strangely right. Their friends noticed how well they fit together. Lisa's best friend May pointed it out during their monthly lunch date. "You two even look alike sometimes," May said. "The way you both tilt your head when you're listening. It's cute." Lisa brushed it off. "People who spend time together start to mirror each other." "No, it's more than that," May insisted. "It's like you were cut from the same cloth." One weekend, Thomas took Lisa to meet his brother David, who lived in the countryside. David had been there through the darkest days after Anna and baby Grace had died. He'd been the one to help Thomas pack away the nursery, to handle the funeral arrangements when Thomas couldn't function. David welcomed Lisa warmly, but Thomas noticed his brother studying her face with an odd expression. Later, when Lisa went to freshen up, David pulled Thomas aside. "There's something familiar about her," he said quietly. "I know. She reminds me of Anna sometimes." David shook his head. "No, it's not just that. Have you ever noticed she has your mother's hands? The long fingers, the way she gestures when she talks?" Thomas frowned. "That's impossible. And that laugh. It's your laugh, Tommy. Exactly the same." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine but pushed the thought away. "You're imagining things." That night, as they drove back to the city, Lisa mentioned something that made the chill return. "I've never told anyone this," she said, looking out at the darkening sky. "But I've had this recurring dream since I was little. I'm in water, lots of water, and someone is carrying me. There's a loud noise like thunder, but it's not thunder. People are shouting. Then I'm in different arms, and the first person is gone. Thomas gripped the steering wheel tighter. The flood had started with a sound like thunder. The dam breaking upstream. It's probably just my mind trying to make sense of being adopted, Lisa continued. The doctors told my parents it's normal for adopted kids to create stories about their birth. Thomas nodded, not trusting himself to speak. A month later, Thomas realized he was in love with Lisa. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. He hadn't planned to love anyone again after Anna, yet here he was, his heart full, to bursting. They were having dinner at a fancy restaurant, the kind with white tablecloths and too many forks, when Thomas decided to tell her. "I need to say something," he began, his voice catching. He cleared his throat. "These past months have been the happiest I've had in 30 years. Lisa reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers felt warm against his. "What I'm trying to say is," he paused, searching for the right words. "I love you too," Lisa said simply, saving him from his struggle. Relief and joy washed over him. "You do?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "I wasn't looking for this. I'd pretty much decided I was better off alone. But then you came along with your bad jokes and your kind heart." Thomas laughed. "My jokes aren't that bad." "They're terrible," Lisa assured him, squeezing his hand. "But I love them anyway." 2 weeks later, Thomas woke up in the middle of the night with a sudden clarity. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with Lisa. At 58, he'd learned that time was precious, and when you found happiness, you held on to it with both hands. The next day, he went to the jewelry store and bought a ring. Not a flashy diamond, but a simple band of rose gold with a small sapphire the color of Lisa's dress the night they met. The questions about their similarities, the birthmark, the strange sense of connection, all of these were pushed aside as Thomas focused on the future. He planned to propose during their upcoming weekend trip to the coast. What he didn't know was that fate had other plans, and the truth that had been hiding in plain sight was about to reveal itself in ways neither of them could have imagined. The coastal trip was perfect. Clear blue skies, the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and seagulls calling overhead. Thomas had planned to propose on their last evening, during dinner at a restaurant overlooking the ocean. But as they walked along the beach that first afternoon, the ring box heavy in his pocket, he couldn't wait any longer. Lisa was bending down to pick up a seashell when Thomas called her name. She turned, the wind blowing her hair across her face, and smiled at him. "This shell looks exactly like one I had as a child," she said, holding it up. "My dad, my adoptive dad, brought it back from a business trip. I kept it on my windowsill for years." Thomas took a deep breath. "Lisa, I need to ask you something." She must have heard something in his voice because her expression changed, became more serious. "What is it?" Thomas hadn't planned to kneel in the sand, but suddenly he was on one knee holding out the small velvet box. "I know we haven't known each other that long, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. Would you marry me?" Lisa's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with surprise. For a terrible moment, Thomas thought she might say no. Then she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. They spent the rest of the weekend, in a happy bubble, making plans for their future together. Back in the city, they decided on a small wedding, just close friends and family. Lisa had no relatives except for a few cousins from her adoptive family. Thomas had his brother David and some old friends who had stuck by him through the dark years after Anna's death. They set the date for June 15th, almost exactly a year after they first met at the charity ball. It seemed fitting to mark the anniversary of their meeting by starting their life together. Wedding preparations took over their lives. Lisa found a simple white dress that made her look like she was glowing from within. Thomas dusted off his old tuxedo and was surprised to find it still fit. "You haven't changed a bit," the tailor said as he made minor adjustments. "Still the same build as 30 years ago." David threw himself into helping with the arrangements, though Thomas sometimes caught his brother watching Lisa with that same puzzled expression. "Are you sure about this?" David asked one evening when they were alone. "It's been less than a year since you met her." I've never been more sure of anything, Thomas replied. When you know, you know. David looked like he wanted to say more, but just clapped Thomas on the shoulder instead. As the wedding day approached, the coincidences and strange connections between Thomas and Lisa seemed to multiply. At the cake tasting, they both chose the same flavor without consulting each other: lemon with raspberry filling. It was my mother's favorite, Thomas explained. Mine too, Lisa said. At least my adoptive mother loved it. She made it for my birthday every year. When they met with the florist, they both pointed to the same arrangement: white roses with sprigs of lavender. Anna carried those at our wedding, Thomas said softly. Lisa touched one of the roses gently. I've always loved this combination. They remind me of something, I'm not sure what. 3 weeks before the wedding, they went to the courthouse to get their marriage license. The clerk, an older woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked up from their paperwork with a frown. I need your birth certificates, she said. Thomas handed over his. Lisa looked embarrassed. Mine is a replacement, she explained. The original was damaged in the flood. This one was issued later based on hospital records. The clerk examined it and nodded. That's fine. Just need to see something official. As they left the courthouse, Thomas noticed Lisa seemed quiet. Everything okay? He asked. She nodded. Just thinking about my birth parents. Times like this, you wonder where you came from, you know? Thomas squeezed her hand. Have you ever tried to find them? The records were mostly destroyed in the flood. All I know is I was born at Memorial Hospital during the storm. My adoptive parents tried to find out more when I was younger, but they hit dead ends everywhere. Thomas felt that now familiar chill. The same hospital where his wife had given birth. The same night. But surely it was just coincidence. Many babies were born that night. 2 weeks before the wedding, they attended a dinner party at the home of Peter Wong, Thomas's oldest friend. Peter had known Thomas since college days and had been there for the birth of baby Grace. So this is the famous Lisa, Peter said, embracing her warmly. Thomas hasn't stopped talking about you. Throughout dinner, Thomas noticed Peter watching Lisa with an odd expression, especially when she laughed or made certain gestures. Later, as Lisa chatted with Peter's wife in the kitchen, Peter pulled Thomas aside. Tommy, have you noticed how much Lisa resembles Anna? He asked quietly. And there's something about her mannerisms, the way she tilts her head when she's listening. It's just like you do. Thomas felt his heart beat faster. David said the same thing. But lots of couples start to look alike, right? Peter didn't seem convinced. And you said she was born during the flood? At Memorial? It's a coincidence, Pete. That's all. Peter looked like he wanted to say more, but just shook his head. The final straw came a week before the wedding. Lisa was helping Thomas clean out some old boxes from his attic to make room for her things, when she found a small wooden chest. What's this? She asked, running her hand over the carved lid. Thomas's throat tightened. That was Anna's jewelry. Box, I haven't opened it since. Lisa immediately set it down. I'm sorry. We can put it back. No, Thomas said. It's time. Maybe you could use something of hers for your something borrowed at the wedding. He opened the box with shaking hands. Inside were Anna's favorite pieces: a pearl necklace, a silver bracelet, and a small locket. Lisa gasped when she saw the locket. It's beautiful. She wore it every day, Thomas said. He picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. It has a picture inside. He clicked it open to reveal a tiny photo of Anna holding newborn Grace. The same photo that hung on his wall downstairs but cropped to fit the small frame. Lisa leaned closer to look, then froze. Her hand moved unconsciously to the crescent-shaped birthmark below her ear. Thomas, she whispered, her voice shaking. The baby in this picture. She has my birthmark. Thomas stared at the photo, then at Lisa's face. The mark was identical. Same shape, same spot. That must be a coincidence, he said, but his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Lisa took the locket from him, her hands trembling. When exactly was your daughter born? The exact date and time? May 12th, 1990. At 3:17 in the morning, the storm was at its worst then. The color drained from Lisa's face. That's my birthday. My adoption papers list my birth time as 3:20 a.m. on May 12th, 1990. They stared at each other, the impossible truth hovering between them like a physical presence. We need to know for sure, Thomas finally said, his voice barely a whisper. Lisa nodded, her eyes wide and frightened. There's a DNA test we can do. My agency uses them sometimes to help connect adoptees with birth families. We could have results in a few days. Thomas reached for her hand, then hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Everything had changed in an instant. Whatever the results, Lisa said, taking his hand firmly in hers. We'll face it together. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, that the wedding now just days away might never happen. Not in the way they had planned. The next 3 days crawled by like years. Thomas and Lisa barely spoke about what might happen if the test confirmed their fears. Instead, they went through the motions of wedding preparations like actors in a play, smiling for the caterer, finalizing seating arrangements, all while a storm cloud hung over them. They had gone to a clinic the morning after finding the locket. The nurse had been cheerful, explaining the process as she swabbed the insides of their cheeks. You two don't look alike, she had commented. Most father-daughter pairs have at least the same nose or eyes. Thomas and Lisa had exchanged glances but said nothing. Results should be ready in 72 hours, the nurse had told them. We'll call you. Now, sitting in his living room on the third day, Thomas checked his phone for the 1,000th time. No calls, no messages. Lisa was at her apartment packing some things. They had decided it was better to wait separately. The phone rang at 4:37 p.m. Thomas's hand shook as he answered. Mr. Lee, this is Dr. Chen from Central Medical Lab. Your results are ready. Thomas clutched the phone tighter. Yes, we normally don't give results over the phone, but you indicated this was urgent. The DNA test shows a 99.9% probability of a parent-child relationship between the samples provided. The room seemed to spin around Thomas. Though he had suspected, hearing the confirmation made his knees buckle. He sank into a chair. Mr. Lee, are you there? Yes, he managed. Thank you. After hanging up, he sat motionless for several minutes. His daughter, Lisa, was his daughter. The little girl he had mourned for 30 years had been alive all this time, growing up just across the city from him. And now they were engaged to be married. His stomach lurched at the thought. He grabbed his keys and drove to Lisa's apartment, his mind racing with questions. How had this happened? Who had made the mistake at the hospital? Why hadn't anyone realized? Lisa opened the door before he could knock. One look at his face told her everything. It's true, isn't it? She whispered. Thomas nodded, unable to speak. Lisa stepped back to let him in, her movement stiff like someone sleepwalking. They sat on opposite ends of her couch, a gulf of silence between them. I called the hospital this afternoon, Lisa finally said, her voice hollow. Spoke to their records department. The woman there remembered the flood. She was just an intern then, but she said it was chaos. Babies were separated from mothers. Records were destroyed by water damage. Some ID bracelets got mixed up or lost. They told me you were dead, Thomas said, his voice cracking. They showed me a baby. Said it was Grace. I never thought to question it. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. So I was Grace? Your Grace? Thomas nodded, his vision blurring. We named you after my mother, Grace Anna Lee. Lisa covered her mouth with her hand, a small sound escaping her. All these years, you were right here, in the same city. I should have known, Thomas said. The birthmark, the way you laugh, it's exactly like my mother's laugh. They sat in silence again, the weight of 30 lost years pressing down on them. What do we do about the wedding? Lisa finally asked. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. The wedding. 50 guests were expecting to attend a marriage ceremony in 3 days. We cancel it, he said. We tell everyone the truth. Everything. Lisa looked terrified at the thought. We don't have to tell them about us. Just that we discovered we're father and daughter. Lisa nodded slowly. I don't even know what to call you now. Her voice trembled. I've been thinking of you as Thomas, but you're my father. The word hung in the air between them. Father. Such a simple word, but now loaded with 3 decades of absence, of possibilities lost, of a relationship that had gone in a direction neither of them could have imagined. I've missed so much, Thomas said softly. Your first steps, your first day of school, your graduation. And I grew up without knowing you, Lisa added. Without knowing where I got my love of thunderstorms or my terrible singing voice. Despite everything, they both smiled at that. Thomas had indeed discovered Lisa's awful singing during a car trip. You get that from me, he admitted. Anna could actually sing. She had a beautiful voice. My mother, Lisa said wonderingly. What was she like? I've seen photos, but... She was kind, Thomas said, his voice warm with memory. The kindest person I've ever known. Smart, too. She was a teacher, high school math. Students would come back years later to thank her. Lisa listened hungrily as Thomas shared memories of Anna. How she couldn't cook to save her life but made the world's best chocolate chip cookies. How she snorted when she laughed too hard. How she cried at every movie, even the happy ones. You have her smile, Thomas said, and her determination. She never gave up on anything or anyone. As evening fell, they ordered pizza, neither having the energy to cook. The awkwardness between them slowly began to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity. A daughter getting to know her father. A father discovering the amazing woman his baby girl had become. We need to call everyone, Lisa said as they finished eating. The guests, the venue, the caterer. Thomas nodded. I'll help you. We'll split the list. What do we tell people? Sorry, turns out we're related. We'll say we discovered we're father and daughter separated by the flood. That's all they need to know. Lisa's phone buzzed with a text. It's May. She wants to know if I've picked up my dress for the final fitting tomorrow. Fresh tears filled her eyes. Thomas reached across the table and took her hand. A fatherly gesture now, not a lover's. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it, for not finding you sooner. Lisa squeezed his hand. It wasn't your fault. You thought I was dead. As night deepened, they made plans for the days ahead. Lisa would stay with her friend May for a while. Thomas would explain everything to his brother David. They would cancel the wedding arrangements together the next day. What about after? Lisa asked as Thomas prepared to leave. After all this dies down? Thomas looked at his daughter. This miracle he had found and almost lost again in the strangest way possible. We start over, he said simply. If you want to. We can get to know each other the right way. Lisa nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'd like that. I've always wondered about my birth parents. I never imagined finding my father would be like this, but I'm glad I found you. They hugged goodbye, their first embrace as father and daughter. It felt different from before, but no less meaningful. As Thomas drove home, his heart heavy with both loss and unexpected joy, he remembered something Anna had said the day Grace was born. Life gives us gifts in the strangest packages sometimes. He hadn't understood then how true those words would prove to be, 30 years later. The morning that was supposed to be Thomas and Lisa's wedding day dawned bright and clear. The venue, a small garden overlooking the city, had been decorated, with white roses and lavender sprigs just as they had planned. The caterers were setting up tables under a white tent. The cake with its lemon and raspberry layers waited in the kitchen, but everything else had changed. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind. Thomas and Lisa had called every guest personally to explain the situation. Most were shocked into silence. A few cried with them. All expressed amazement at the miracle of their finding each other after so many years. It's like something from a movie, May had said, hugging Lisa fiercely. But better, because it's real. David had been quiet when Thomas told him, then finally said, I knew something was familiar about her. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Lisa's friends from the adoption agency had been especially supportive, helping to contact guests and rearrange plans. Together, Thomas and Lisa had decided to use the venue in preparations for something entirely different, a celebration of their reunion. People are already coming, Lisa had reasoned. The food is paid for. Why not turn it into something positive? So invitations had been reissued, explaining that guests were now invited to witness a father-daughter reunion ceremony instead of a wedding. Now, as Thomas adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for what might have been with Lisa as his wife, but overwhelming joy at having found his daughter. Sadness for the 30 years they had lost, but hope for the decades they might still have together. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Ready when you are. They had decided to ride to the venue separately. Lisa was staying with May, who would drive her. Thomas would go with his brother David. You okay? David asked as they drove through the city. Thomas nodded. Better than okay. I'm about to officially meet my daughter again. When they arrived, the garden was already filling with guests. Many looked confused despite the explanations. A few were openly crying. All watched with curious eyes as Thomas took his place under the flower-covered arch, where he had expected to say wedding vows. Music began to play. Not the wedding march they had planned, but a gentle melody that Anna had loved. Thomas felt his chest tighten at the sound. Then Lisa appeared at the entrance to the garden. She wasn't wearing the wedding dress she had chosen. Instead, she wore a simple blue sundress, the same color as the dress she'd worn the night they first met. In her hands, she carried a small bouquet of white roses and lavender. She walked slowly down the aisle between the chairs, her eyes fixed on Thomas. When she reached him, he saw tears shimmering in her eyes. The celebrant, who had been meant to marry them, stepped forward with a warm smile. Friends and family, she began. We are gathered here today for something quite extraordinary. Not a wedding, as you originally expected, but a reunion. A father and daughter, separated by tragedy 30 years ago, have found each other in the most unexpected way. A murmur went through the crowd. The celebrant continued, explaining briefly what had happened during the flood, the mix-up at the hospital, how Thomas and Lisa had met by chance at the charity ball. Today, she said, they wish to formally acknowledge their relationship and celebrate this miracle with all of you who care for them. Thomas had prepared a short speech. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, hands trembling slightly as he opened it. 30 years ago, he began, his voice thick with emotion, I held my newborn daughter in my arms and promised to love her forever. Hours later, I was told she was gone, swept away by the flood that took her mother too. He paused, gathering himself. I kept that promise anyway. I loved the memory of my baby girl every day for 30 years. I imagined the woman she might have become. Strong, kind, brilliant. Thomas looked up at Lisa, tears now flowing freely down his face. And then I met Lisa. By some miracle I'll never understand, my daughter had grown up to be even more amazing than I could have imagined. Different name, different life, but the same soul I had fallen in love with the moment she was born. Lisa was crying now too, but smiling through her tears. I didn't recognize her as my daughter when we met. Instead, I recognized a kindred spirit, someone who felt like home. Now I know why. Thomas refolded the paper and tucked it away. Today was supposed to be our wedding day. Instead, it's something even more precious, the day I officially find my daughter again. Lisa stepped forward, taking her turn to speak. Her voice was steady despite her tears. I grew up loved by wonderful adoptive parents, she said, but I always felt something was missing, a piece of myself I couldn't find. I searched for it in my work, helping other children find families, in my friendships, in my travels. She looked directly at Thomas. When I met Thomas, something clicked into place. I felt complete for the first time. Now I understand why. My soul recognized my father even when my mind didn't. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the locket, the one with the picture of baby Grace and her mother. This belonged to my birth mother, she said, holding it up. Today my father is giving it to me as it always should have been. Thomas took the locket and gently placed it around Lisa's neck. Then he wrapped his arms around her in a tight hug as the guests burst into applause. The celebrant stepped forward again. "Thomas Lee," she said formally. "Do you acknowledge this woman, Lisa Chen, born Grace Anna Lee, as your daughter, and promise to love and support her for the rest of your days?" "I do," Thomas said, his voice strong and clear now. "With all my heart." "And Lisa Chen, do you acknowledge this man, Thomas Lee, as your father, and accept him as part of your life from this day forward?" Lisa smiled through her tears. "I do." "Then by the power of love and the miracle that brought you together, I pronounce you father and daughter, reunited at last." The celebration afterward was unlike any wedding reception. Instead of toasting a new marriage, friends shared stories of both Thomas and Lisa, marveling at traits they now recognized as family resemblances. "She has your laugh," Peter told Thomas as they watched Lisa talking with May across the room. "Can't believe I didn't see it before. And my mother's hands," Thomas added. "And Anna's smile." Lisa joined them, the locket gleaming at her throat. "The photographer wants some pictures of us by the fountain." As they walked across the garden, Lisa slipped her hand into Thomas's, just as she had done countless times before. But now the gesture meant something entirely different. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked quietly. Thomas squeezed her hand. "We start building our relationship the right way. We get to know each other as father and daughter. And maybe, when you're ready, you can call me Dad." Lisa's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I'd like that, Dad." The word felt strange on her lips, but wonderful too. A word she had never expected to say to her birth father. As the photographer positioned them near the fountain, with roses blooming all around and guests looking on, Thomas and Lisa faced their new beginning, not as husband and wife, but as father and daughter, brought together by fate, chance, and perhaps a little bit of magic. Their story would make headlines, of course. Father almost marries long lost. Daughter. But those who were there that day knew the real story was much simpler and much more beautiful. After 30 years apart, a father and daughter had found each other again, against impossible odds. And that was worth celebrating more than any wedding could ever be.